When Billy Napier was hired from Louisiana after Florida's 2021 season, one of the biggest things that was promoted in his hiring was his ability to put together a staff that can recruit and evaluate talent efficiently. Guys that can come, the guys and the ladies that he's also brought into the recruiting staff that know how to evaluate players, build a connection with the players, make them feel as if they're truly cared for and sought after by the University of Florida outside of just their athletic prowess. You know, you have some swing and some misses just like any other college program because no college program hits every single player that they recruit. That's just not possible. But a critique that of Napier's recruiting was that he couldn't finish in the top 10. And this past year he did that. You know, when Florida was 4-5 and Scott Strickland had posted the letter announcing that Billy Napier was going to come back to Florida in the 2025 season for the 2025 season, even though they seemed like they were on the verge of missing another bowl game. Not only did it help boost the recruiting rankings for Florida, but it seemed like all the dominoes started to fall into place, and Florida created some momentum. You know, winning four straight games to end the season and boosting their recruiting class from what used to be in the 50s to number 8 per 247 Sports. They signed about 26 players. 19 of them have enrolled. 7 of them will enroll in the summer. Joseph Mbachu, Miles Johnson, Byron Lewis, Onis Konambani, Moise Tarkura, Daniel Pierre Louis, and a kicker I think that's Mississippi. Yeah. Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, Evan Noel. You know, and Florida obviously has brought in their transfer portals, such as Harrison Bailey, Michael Caraway Jr., Kofi Asari, J. Michael Sturvident, and Tommy Domen from Michigan. But we're just talking about the high school recruits that Florida's brought in. And this video is going to be about which recruit I think can have the biggest impact on Florida season. I'm going to start with Hilton, aka Drake Stubbs. This guy was probably my favorite addition to the entire class. He's a guy that flipped from Miami to Florida and coming out of Jacksonville, so he's a local kid, kind of like Pop Howard from Jacksonville as well. Andrew Ivins, a director of scouting for CBS, he describes Stubbs as a spirited competitor in the box and alert in coverage, strikes people as a tackler, oftentimes exploding through the hips, and tracks the football well on the back end and has the football skills to come down with takeaways, which is big because that was what was a big improvement on Florida's defense last year. Florida was actually in the top, I believe, the top 8 in the SEC in terms of getting takeaways on defense, and that was a big time improvement for the Gators. Even though, big time improvement for the Gators because they only had like I think 6 turnovers overall the previous year in 2023. You know, the turnovers that Bryce Thornton got in the Ole Miss game, how Florida was getting strip sacks and fumbles against Florida State, how they were getting turnovers against Kentucky and UCF, and they were just getting offenses off the field better on third downs. And turnovers were a big part of that. And Hilton Drake Stubbs is heading to a safety room led by Jordan Castell and Bryce Thornton. And they just Josiah Davis. There's some very good players in that secondary room, but they kind of have lost a little bit of experience with Tracrezy Bridges and Jason Marshall Jr. leaving. So I want to know, can these young guys continue to mature and help complement Florida's front seven, which looks to be pretty good this year? Uh, Stubbs has insane potential, and can be a center fielder, hammer hybrid that knows how to be at the right spot at the right time. So I'm really excited to see what he can do for Florida this season. Now you go to back to the front seven that I talked about, or at least referenced. You have Stephon Shivers. This guy is like a Desmond Watson clone, essentially. I'm trying to find him. There he is, from Brentwood, Tennessee. 6'4.5", 365, but they're actually saying since he's been at Florida, he's actually ballooned up to almost 400 pounds. So he's that perfect nose tackle frame that Florida wants in their defense. You know, that's what they use Desmond Watson. That's what they use with Cam Jackson. Big 360 plus guys that can move well in short range and can be a plug in the run defense and clog up lanes in the middle. And I think with the way Florida rotates their big nose tackles around, I think he can also get on the field a little bit sooner than some would expect. Him, Makai Burrow, DeAndre Robinson, it's a nice nucleus of D tackles that can come in and bring in some nice rotation reps to help out Caleb Banks, who's returning to Florida this season. So I like the potential of Mr. Shivers here. Byron Lewis, this was the guy that's coming to Florida in the summer. He was the final running back addition to the class. Florida already had two running backs committed in Chad Gasper Jr. and Waltez Clark Jr., or Duke Clark, as he's listed on Florida's football roster site. It kind of confused me at first because I'm like, who the hell's Duke? But they're talking about Waltez. So the Gators ended the season with great optimism surrounding in the offensive backfield. You know, it was highly speculated before the season that Florida would miss the departure of Trevor Etienne to the hated Georgia Bulldogs. And I'm still not going to say that a running back room without Trevor Etienne is better than a running back room with Trevor Etienne, because Trevor Etienne is pretty good. Florida fans, we know that. But Florida still saw great production out of that position. You know, Jaden Ball, the freshman, he had 5 touchdowns against Kentucky, led the team in rushing yards with 673, had 5 yards per carry. He was a part of the SEC All-Freshman honors, 693 yards in rushing. And then behind him was a JUCO standout from Florida's 2023 class, Jacoby Jackson, who was third on the team with 509 rushing yards. In addition to Macho Johnson producing, could have had a better season if not for some injuries, but you know, Macho Johnson was still a good running back for Florida. And this didn't stop Florida from adding 3 running backs into their class to further bolster that room. That Byron Lewis was the final addition, as I said, coming out of American Heritage, so right here in Fort Lauderdale. You know, his talent adds to an already deep room. And in my opinion, I think since the staff was still looking to add him to the room with all the running backs they still had coming back and all the running backs they had in their recruiting class as well, Gasper and Clark, something tells me that there's big potential for this guy, and that Billy Napier must feel that his running style fits his offense. And say what you want about Billy Napier, I don't question that guy when it comes to running backs, because he's had a revolving door of running backs that have come in and played well for Florida. Etienne, Macho Johnson, Ball and Jackson, who I was just talking about. Trayon Webb was looking good before he got hurt in the season. He probably could have had a big year himself. Florida's running back room is one of the many bright spots from a depth standpoint. Nashawn Montgomery, this is a guy that I think it probably isn't getting not talked about enough, because Florida has so many great players at that wide receiver class. You know, Dallas Wilson, Vernell Brown Jr., Luis Tankara. But Nashawn Montgomery, I think he could be that inside slot guy that could come in for Florida and move the chains on some big passing downs. That's a truck you hear in the background. Sorry if you heard that. I think Florida really needs that inside slot playmaker on passing downs with DJ Lagway to complement the great weapons that they have on the boundary. You know, they already have Eugene Wilson, J. Michael Sturvin, as I've mentioned, Aiden Mizell. I talked about the receiving recruiting class, and apparently they also have another potential walk-on that is making some headway in terms of maybe returning punts for Florida on special teams. I can't think of his name at the moment. I'll be sure to mention him in another video later on. But I think Florida has so many options at that wide receiver spot that they can almost pick and choose which one could just come in and just play right away. And I'm putting my money on Nashawn Montgomery. Not to say that he's better than those guys or whatever, but it was just which recruit could I see come in and be the most impactful. Jaden Woods. He's a big-time edge rusher who flipped from Penn State to Florida. He was one of the big recruiting wins for Florida in the ending of their 2025 cycle, the highest-graded edge rusher for Florida in their class. And coming in, rubbing elbows with L.J. McCray, and you know, while they're learning behind Tyreek Sapp and George Gums Jr., this is a very nice rotation of players, and not just him, but also I believe it was Kofi Ofade that I talked about Kofi Asade from UMass. There's a lot of great players at that edge rushing position, and Mike Peterson, along with the other defensive coaches, have done a good job of stacking up talent at that position. And Jaden Woods, from what I've been hearing, has been killing it in the weight room. And it would not surprise me if he got substantial amount of reps as a freshman heading into the 2025 season. And then the final guy on this, we're going to talk about for this video, Micah Jones. He is a first tight. He was the only tight end to sign with. He was the first tight end to sign with Florida on early signing day, but Florida was able to add another tight end to the recruiting class, Cameron Costman, later on in January. But Micah comes out of Madison, Mississippi, from Madison Central. He can come in and compete for a starting position that was left open with Arliss Birmingham transferring. He transferred to Bowling Green. You know, the tight end is not necessarily a high volume, reception position in Billy Napier's offense. They utilize tight ends a lot in the run game and in the pass game, but there's not a number one tight end that's going to come in and demand all the reps. You know what I mean? That's what I'm talking about. And I think Micah Jones can come in and compete with that spot along with Amir Jackson, who I'm keeping an eye on throughout this spring practice. And maybe he can come and having that another good tight end can come in and stretch the field with these great wide receivers that Florida has at their disposal. So those are the recruits that I think could have a big impact on Florida season this year. Stubbs, Shivers, Lewis, Montgomery, Woods, Micah Jones. Those are just some of the players out of this class that could turn out to be really good players for the Orange and Blue. This is by far Bill Napier's best recruiting class, and I can't wait to see them get on the field.